Aloha, Steve. Could you give us some background about your Hilo, Oahu, and Kona activities?
All right. Well, I started out in the energy business in Hilo as an energy extension agent and energy analyst for the state of Hawaii, and mostly worked with smaller projects in the Hilo area, some commercial buildings, a lot of residential, and also worked on renewable energy projects. And so I kind of cut my teeth in Hilo and went on to be the energy coordinator of the city and county of Honolulu. And I headed the Rebuild Hawaii Consortium, which included over 350 agencies, and won the U.S. Department of Energy's National Energy Champion Award for 2002. So it's been a few years in the business.
Okay, you were telling us about Kona's experience?
Yeah, so I've moved back to the Big Island, where I've been now for some 42 years, and my wife likes where it's hot and dry, so we're in Kona, and I've been working to turn my condo project at Kona Pacific here in town into sort of a model energy project. And so I did solar hot water panels up on the roof, and solar PV, a big 100 kW array of solar PV. And we put in LED exit lights, LED hall lights, linear LED lights, and all.
How many units?
So 125 total units in the project, so pretty good size. It's kind of an old resort building, 30 years old, and needed a lot of upgrades. And as a homeowner,
did they put a lot of insulation 30 years ago?
Actually, the roof's in good shape. It's got 8 inches of foam insulation and then a white elastomeric coating over the top of that to keep things cool. And I chose the building to live in because it's made out of concrete. And so unlike a lot of condo buildings here that are wood frame, that are hot little boxes that need air conditioning all the time, the beauty of a concrete building is that you have that thermal protection against heat. And we have very large overhangs, very large lanais, so that blocks a lot of the sun from coming in. So yeah, it's really quite comfortable. So most of the time, fan is perfectly fine. I've got an air conditioner, but I never turn it on. So yeah, part of living in Hawaii is to pick out the right house when you choose to. So I mentioned LEDs. These are solid state lights. I just put in a couple hundred of them in my condo complex. I actually had to help rewire them. We disconnected the ballast, which is in a fluorescent light, and because these solid state lights don't need them, so that's an additional energy savings. I got nice color corrected bulbs so that the light in our hallways looks good all the time, and in our parking garage areas. And the payback on that is 7 months. So in a single...
could you go over payback period? Because that's so essential.
Yeah, so because we have some of the highest rates in the country, paybacks tend to be better, right? Your return on investment is better. And so whenever you talk about a 7-month payback, that's just extraordinary. I mean, you figure a 4-year payback is still 25% return on investment. You can't get that kind of return on investment in the bank, or most legal types of financial schemes for that matter. So energy efficiency is one of the best investments that you can do as a business or as a homeowner. And so plus we sweeten the pot by throwing in things like rebate. So $10,000 a year in savings for my 125 unit condo complex with just that project alone. With the solar hot water system, we're saving $30,000 a year and about $45,000, I would guess, on the PV. And
so what's the payback on the solar water heater?
So on both the solar water heating and the PV, we structured those using third-party financing, these power purchase agreements. So my homeowners association, which is a nonprofit, isn't eligible for tax credits, right? It could not leverage up to 65% of the cost through the tax credits. So we brought in a hui of investors and financed both of the projects separately. So we agree to buy green power at a lot less than Hawaiian Electric charges. And we get to take advantage of the tax credits, even though we aren't the investors. And we get power for the next 20 years under the contract at a lot less than Hawaiian Electric was going to charge. And we know it's very predictable because we have an actual contract that says from year to year what we're going to be paying. So when you talk about budgeting for a homeowners association, that's a really big deal. And so this type of third-party financing has lots of advantages. So, plus we don't do the maintenance. If the system breaks down, we're actually only paying for the power actually delivered. So if it breaks down, then the investors aren't getting their money, and you can be sure they're going to send a maintenance man out to properly maintain the system. So it gives you a level of quality assurance that you wouldn't have.
One of my goals was to pick your brain in regards to how the average homeowner is going to benefit from watching this. So can you sort of go over an energy audit and what an individual can actually do in the house to?
So there are energy audits that can be done. I think it's HCEOC at the county level that has somebody that can walk you through. They talk about you can wrap your hot water heater with a blanket, an insulation blanket.
Oh, sort of go over what an energy audit is.
Okay, so an energy audit is basically where somebody comes into your house with a clipboard and starts looking at your energy usage. You know, how old is your refrigerator? Do you keep a separate refrigerator out in the garage for your beer? You know, so they look at everything. They look at the insulation value of your home. But for most homeowners, about 40% of your energy use is for your hot water. And then once again, solar hot water is got rebates if you want to do it out of your own pocket. It's pretty cheap these days, like about 500 people a year, 500 homes on the Big Isle here are going with solar hot water. If you're worried about being held up by Hawaiian Electric for your PV system, don't waste time. Just
do you know the payback period on solar hot water?
I believe with the rebates, it's under 5 years now.
Great.
Yeah. If you use air conditioning, you know, we certainly encourage people to use ceiling fans. I actually like tower fans better. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They're about 3-4 feet tall, and they're more directional.
Okay.
So at night I can have it blowing on me and not on my wife. When I cook, I hardly ever use my oven anymore. One of the pictures that I gave you was for a Cree LED bulb that screws into a standard socket. And you want to make sure you get a good color corrected one. I like a warm white or a soft white in the home. So if you've got a light by the bed that you read by, you want good light. They're down under $5 now for an LED, and I think mine uses like 7 to 9 watts for a 60-watt equivalent.
And then what's the life expectancy of it?
Oh, years.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got lights that are on 24/7, 365, like my condo hallway lights, you know, that's why I had such a favorable payback. Then it makes a lot of sense to change out to an LED sooner than later.
Then the other major electricity user would be cooling. So
yeah, and once again, if you can avoid AC completely, that's a good thing. I have lived in my condo for 7 years, and I only recently turned on the AC, and I was kind of shocked how much my electric bill jumped up. And I was just turning it on for a little while and then turning it off just to keep the heat down at night so I could sleep better. But for people who have it on all the time, that's a big cost for you. So if you can get by with fans, if You can plant trees around your property, insulate your roof, things like that to help bring the heat down so that you can just use the fan and not your AC. You're a lot better off.
Right.
Fridges, a fridge built in 1970, if you compare that to a refrigerator today, they use about a third of the power of one from 1970. And so they have what are called appliance efficiency standards. President Obama just recently bumped them up again. And they give grants through the U.S. Department of Energy to the manufacturers to make them even more energy efficient. So now when you buy them, they're all going to have LEDs on the inside instead of a standard bulb. They've got all sorts of features.
Yeah.
So you look for the Energy Star label on the refrigerator. And once again, Point Energy will give you a rebate to put in an Energy Star refrigerator. The other thing is to look at the Energy Guide. Federal law now mandates that all manufacturers have tags on the outside of appliances that tells you what the energy use is for the entire year. So they all have that now by federal law.
Great.
So you can compare models.
You would have never seen that under Bush.
Yes. And the other group that gets involved is the state's consumer advocate. And so their job is entirely to look after all of us. So there's lots of built-in protections there.
Okay. The PUC, what's their mandate?
Part of the mandate is reliable power. You know, we all are hooked on our electronic devices. They want power to be consistent and reliable. Even when we have storm activities, they try and keep the grid stable. So part of it is grid reliability. Part of it's cost. And the other thing is the idea of reducing the amount of money that leaves the state of Hawaii for imported oil. And so that's a big thing. And as much as we have a virtual cornucopia of renewable energy options, why not do that instead of having our money go out of state for imported oil?
And then there's the generating companies. And so what are their mandates?
So some of the older generation is actually owned by the utilities. And the PUC made a decision to get them to buy power from independent power producers. So H-Power, which is the garbage to energy plant on Oahu, for instance, provides a certain amount of firm power on the grid, and they get paid a certain tariff, a certain amount of money to provide that power. And here on this island, you've got geothermal providing power, you've got wind farms providing power, and you've even got home solar systems that are providing power onto the grid, as well as the older oil-fired generators that are still around. So a little bit of diversity there, and these new producers are under what are called power purchase agreements, and these are utility agreements. And homeowners now, when they buy solar, are doing the same thing. You can choose not to own the system on your roof. Somebody else will install it. They'll take advantage of tax credits. Up to 65% of state and local tax credits can be written off for your entire solar system. And a lot of homeowners like me, who are retired, for instance, or on fixed incomes, can't leverage the tax credits, but private investors can. So they've come into the market big time in Hawaii.
Why don't they let private owners do that?
Well, once again, a lot of private owners, homeowners, don't have taxable exposure. In other words, because I'm retired under the state system, my income levels aren't high enough, whereas investors are bringing money into the state of Hawaii. About 1 in 4 jobs in the construction industry these days is in solar. And so it's all hundreds of millions of dollars coming into the state that's dropped unemployment down to 4.4% and allowed us to recover much quicker than a lot of the rest of the country has. So we can give solar a lot of credit for having participated in that. And all of that investor money coming in, taking advantage of the tax credits, have created jobs here in Hawaii. So it's been a good thing all the way around. So there's an arm of the Public Utilities Commission called Hawaii Energy. And I would encourage your viewers at home to Google Hawaii Energy. And it used to be that rebates were given out by Hawaiian Electric, and the legislature decided that they were padding it, the program a little too much, and it wasn't being as aggressive as the legislature wanted. So they created a separate entity, an arm of the Public Utilities Commission, and contracted that work out. So that entity is Hawaii Energy. So if you want to put in an energy efficient Star refrigerator or an Energy Star air conditioning system, or any of a number of things that are eligible for rebates these days, Hawaiian Energy are the folks to talk to.
They even have a wing that does just businesses as well.
Yeah, that's right. And they give training programs for building managers. So if you live in a condo complex and you want to see your building save more energy so your monthly maintenance fees aren't going up, put your property manager on the list for one of these training programs, and take advantage of all of the opportunities, all the rebate programs that are out there. It's certainly in your best interest. So this is why this whole issue of Hawaiian Electric holding up these permits, these types of connections, is really gotten to be a sore point for a lot of people. You know, not only solar companies that want to do business and are adding to our economy, but to a lot of homeowners who are looking for relief and see this type of free money option through a power purchase agreement as the way to go. So Hawaiian Electric needs to do whatever it needs to do, bring on batteries, for instance, onto the grid that would absorb these types of fluctuations and protect everybody else who needs power, but also to allow all of that energy onto the grid so that we can start shutting down some of the oil-fired power plants. So the whole thing needs to be solved by Hawaiian Electric, and the PUC is breathing down their necks to make sure it happens. So we're hoping in the next year we'll see a big breakthrough, and then we can get back to the business of putting solar in everybody's homes. About 500 people on the Big Island put in solar hot water systems. Hawaiian Electric isn't holding those projects up, right? It's only the PV projects that are being held up. So about 40% of residential energy use is solar, could be solved with solar hot water. And the other beauty of solar hot water is you have a storage tank. And so that's like having a big battery at your house. So there you're not putting anything onto the grid, you don't have those types of issues. So if you think you're being held up, go ahead and put the solar hot water in, and then put in the PV panels to make up the difference later on.
Well, Hawaiian Electric, they're saying that, oh, it's a safety issue, it's a safety issue.
So on the safety issue, let me address that.
Right.
At my condo, we have a special switch so that if the grid goes down, we're not feeding power onto the grid while their construction crews are out trying to fix the lines, right? So you want to protect their workers. So that's a reasonable thing. And solar companies have this type of equipment now. Smart inverters, things like that can help address that issue. The other thing is more and more you're starting to see battery systems being packaged together with solar.
But the batteries are so expensive.
Yeah, but now they're financing them through the power purchase agreement, so you're not seeing an upfront capital cost. Elon Musk, who's kind of a famous guy, is working with Solar City, one of the big solar companies in the United States, and he has the Tesla car, and he's building what they call a gigafactory to bring the cost of batteries down.
All these states are trying to attract him to come to their place.
So he's moving ahead in the factory. There's a lot of investors. I have no doubt that it's going to happen. And what we're hoping is that the cost of those home battery systems is going to drop down. Some people who are in areas in the United States where they see frequent power outages, trees, lots of trees near power lines, things like that. It seems like every little storm puts them out of power. For those homeowners, they're already investing in batteries. The other thing that you're starting to see as an accessory to solar are what are called fuel cells. And so if you have a gas line, if you live in an area in the country where they have natural gas lines, and a lot of people do in the mainland, we don't here in Hawaii, they can run a fuel cell using natural gas, and it senses when it needs to come online and provide the power when your solar isn't doing it. So at some point, people are going to be able to walk away from the grid completely. A lot of people here on this island have battery systems and live off-grid. Puna, of course, is well known for the number of people who live off-grid. But I
they're
think
doing fine right now, while the rest of their community isn't.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, with Albesius crashing around them.
Yeah. Well, that's why if you have a standalone system, then that's not going to affect you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So as batteries drop and solar continues to drop in cost, I think you're going to see the whole utility model that we've had for decades, 100 years in Hawaii for that matter, changing. And that's putting Hawaiian Electric and all of their subsidiaries on the various islands into a pretty challenging situation. Their investors wanted to see a nice rate of return, which they had for a long time as a monopoly utility. And now with people more and more putting solar on their roofs and starting to break free from that dependence on the grid, it's going to take a radical change of the business model that Hawaiian Electric has had. So Kauai went to a cooperative. And
I was going to ask you that. How in the world did Kauai shift from that capitalist model to a hui?
So you heard it from me. As an energy guy, I'm going to predict that you're going to see Maui and the Big Island go to cooperative next.
Cool.
That's my prediction.
Well, so Maui also looks after Lanai and Molokai.
Yeah.
So all of them would go that way, huh?
Yeah.
Cool.
I just think that way the people themselves, and they get to make the decisions instead of mainland investors. So I think that's increasingly going to be the model.
Great.
The other model that is possible if the investor-owned utility model fails is to do municipal power, where each of the counties, for instance, could, there are companies that will come in and do this, convert a utility like Hawaiian Electric over to a municipal power. And so it's very common throughout the United States to see both municipal power and cooperatives. A lot of rural cooperatives that were built back in the 1940s, for instance, are still around today, and they work fine. They provide good power. And so, yeah, it's time to rethink and quit shipping money from Hawaii to investors in the mainland and elsewhere that don't necessarily make good decisions for consumers here. So on this island, as I mentioned, we have kind of a cornucopia of energy options. And so right now about 30% of the grid is geothermal, although sometimes they shut down and to the inconvenience of their neighbors and perhaps the public health threat to their neighbors. But the whole idea of having a central power plant and having really long lines to provide power, they're getting away with that from that model completely, all over the country. And it's having a big impact on utilities all across the country. And so I mentioned the idea of power purchase agreements. These are utility agreements between independent power producers and the utility. So they're getting out of the generation business completely. And so what you really want is a grid that's more reliable, and it's more reliable if you have assets that are all over the place, and a smart grid that's able to sense changes. So if somebody is driving in a truck and runs into a power pole up in Honokaa, he isn't causing a rolling blackout for the whole island. And so smart grid technology, smart meters, and distributed architecture for your energy generation are becoming the new norm. You know, that's where we're heading. That's the future of energy for this island.
When you were talking about smart grids, you mentioned architectural something.
Okay, so
What is
they
it?
call it a distributed architecture.
Oh, no.
So rather than a central power plant, if we all had solar on our roofs, either solar hot water or solar PV, that would be kind of the ultimate in distributed energy architecture, right? 'Cause rather than having a community power plant for Honokaa or one for Hawi or whatever, by having all of us having solar on our roofs, we've really created a really large distributed network of energy production. And when you talk about stability on the grid, that's really the best plan that you could come up with.
But what about at night?
So at night, once again, if you use batteries or if you split hydrogen and you put on your grid fuel cells that run on hydrogen that pick up the load when the solar is not available, then or large-scale batteries, grid-scale batteries, then you've got firm power all night long, and you're not curtailing anybody's power. So that's the most efficient.
I've seen another system where they pump water. You got a head,
Yeah.
so you pump water to the top.
Yeah, Honolulu is kind of unique. We have what they call the 400 system. We have reservoirs all over Oahu that are at 400 feet in elevation that provide pressure for everybody's water. And I got approached by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to put inline hydro.
Yeah.
And so during the day, when people are flushing toilets and taking showers, then you're producing power. And then the power at night, which is could be set up to be cheaper. In other words, off-peak power. You could have what are called time of use rates, and then you could pump the water uphill into your reservoirs at night when people aren't using it, using off-peak power. So, pretty nifty system. We've got a few locations here, like up in Waimea, that can do that, where we have large reservoirs that are up at a higher elevation. You've got the Kohala ditch system that can be used. They could put that in a pipe instead of an open ditch, and then they could make hydropower out of it, taking advantage of gravity. Gravity's influence on water making power. So, yeah, there's lots of options. I mean, we really have a lot of things. When I hear politicians just talk about geothermal, I kind of go scratch my head over that.
Actually, you're building in sustainability with the greater mix of energy sources than mono.
Yeah, and in my mind, the best thing is still demand-side management. When you look at what the PUC has put forward as the roadmap for our future, they're not talking about new energy sources first. What they talk about first is what's called demand response. And that's where the grid itself is more efficient. And there are buildings, for instance, high-rise buildings in Honolulu that could be dialed back 10% or 15% by using computer technology. Long before we started talking about new power generation for new power generation's sake, there's so much more that we can do to become more energy efficient first, and that's always the cheapest thing for all of us. So when a politician starts talking about geothermal and not talking about energy efficiency, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.